Hello, I'm Michael Phillips, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Nirvana Fallacy, or when better is better than best. Now, a lot of people hear Nirvana and they think of a couple of different things, so let's get it out of the way that the Nirvana Fallacy isn't about Kurt Cobain or the band Nirvana, and it's not about a spiritual state of enlightenment. So let's explain the Nirvana Fallacy through an example. If we were to set the requirements for a cheeseburger, you might have these list of items here. You have a bun. In between that, you've got a beef patty, some other assortment of toppings, cheese, lettuce, tomato. Do you like crispy onion straws? Any of that. So that's one set. Then you have some more qualitative. The bun you don't want it to be stale or moldy. You want the beef cooked all the way. It should be served warm. And if you ordered it to go, it should be packaged to go. If you order it for there, it should be packaged and properly presented for eating at your table. So you probably had an image in your head of what that burger looked like. And I'm betting it looked more like the burger in the top picture versus the burger in the bottom. But I'm betting the last time you went to a McDonald's or a Burger King, the burger you got looked more like the burger on the bottom. And you probably didn't complain about it. It was probably fine. You probably enjoyed the burger as much as you expected to. And you really didn't expect the burger to look like the burger in the top when you got it. But that's how it is presented in the ideal state of a commercial. So if we take a step back here, we say the definition of the Nirvana Fallacy is X is what we have or can deliver, and Y is the perfect solution. Therefore, X is not good enough. That would be the Nirvana Fallacy. So if producing the burger on the bottom wasn't good enough because you knew that the burger on top was possible, that might lead you into the trap of the Nirvana Fallacy, because there aren't the food artists putting your burger together that they have putting those burgers together for a commercial. They can't afford to pay them and still make a profit for what you would pay for a burger. And so based on that price point and their constraints, what they can provide you from a burger standpoint is the burger on the bottom. And I think most people are happy with that because, fast food places are not going away. It's a very strong industry. If we want to talk about another example, one that was commonly referenced in what I read was vaccinations. So vaccinations are not 100% effective. They are not 100% without side effects. And oftentimes, there's sometimes people who will claim the science isn't in on all of them yet. Well, all those are different takes on the Nirvana Fallacy. Just because something's not 100% effective doesn't mean it's not better than the current state. So we know through many of our vaccinations that if you get to 90% or 95% of the population having it, you have what you call herd immunity. And we've wiped out many diseases in the US, or taking them to near non-existent through vaccinations. And they've been an overall positive. But yet some people continue to argue against them because they aren't 100% effective, and they do sometimes have side effects, whether that's feeling sick the rest of that week, or with a flu shot you may feel like you kind of got a little mini flu the next day or something like that. But by and large, they're good things and provide value to society. And just because they aren't perfect doesn't mean they aren't worth doing. I put a quote on here from one of the people I read. Nirvana Fallacy is the lapse into error of comparing a defective or suboptimal solution against an idealized or perfect state, failing to recognize that the assumed achievement of perfection is impossible in a world of flaws, limits, and constraints. So It's not likely with the genetic diversity that, we may get all vaccines to 100% effective, but, you know, they're often very effective, so they are worth doing. So the Nirvana fallacy is also called the perfectionist or perfect solution fallacy, and so I thought it was appropriate to add some quotes on perfection here to provide some context. Voltaire, the famous "perfect is the enemy of good." Tolstoy, "if you look for perfection, you'll never be content." Salvador Dali, "have no fear of perfection, you'll never reach it." These are all great things to keep in mind when you're considering the problems that go along with the Nirvana fallacy of striving for perfection, which is not necessarily a bad thing in itself, but you need to keep it in context and make sure that you keep your goals set on what is real and what is attainable. And I think that's what these quotes all speak to, is that, there is a limit to what we are able to do in terms of achieving perfection. Now let's take a look at some of the writing about the Nirvana fallacy. First, here on the left, you see a quote that talks about the benefit of approaching and trying to strive towards perfection, and that approach being where the real benefit is, knowing that it's only an approach, that you're never ever going to get there. Here in the middle, I like the one on the top. Quest for perfection also leads to dithering. You start losing that benefit when you start trying to strive to perfection. It's one of the takes on the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the work only gives you 20% of the value, and 20% of the work gives you 80% of the value. You spend a lot of time in that last 20% of value, then you're going to be dithering about. Or the second quote there about creating good works, and the desire for perfection impels us toward quality, but you don't want to become trapped in this permanent search for perfection that's just going to lead to dissatisfaction and disappointment. And then finally there on the right, talking about falling victim to the perfectionist fallacy has a negative effect on your enjoyment, which is kind of what the previous one was saying. And so if you are just striving for this perfect vision, this ideal scenario, then you're not going to be able to enjoy what you're able to produce, or the real attainable solution that you've implemented. And you should be able to get satisfaction from doing something well and making something better than it is, even when you can't make it perfect, because perfect is oftentimes not attainable. So how does the Nirvana fallacy impact management? What I touched on earlier in the previous slide, projects that can only deliver 80% of your requirements, should they be pursued? You're building a solution that is better than you currently have, but can't meet everything you've envisioned it to produce. Oftentimes there is value in these projects, but sometimes it's easy to get lost in the, well, it can't give me everything, and so it reduces the value. And there is real reduced value in not being able to deliver everything that you would like to, but you have to keep it in perspective of, here is the real 80% I can get, and if I get that, what is the value of that versus what is it going to cost me to deliver this 80%. Second, as scope creep. When you're pursuing perfection, you can often unintentionally increase the size of the project to build out every possible use case, to fit every user scenario, how unlikely or not it may be. And if you spend a lot of time on the edges trying to perfect something for non-realistic use cases, then you're going to spend a lot of money in things that don't give you a lot of value. Another place where the Nirvana fallacy can have an impact is when you're choosing the technology stack to build your applications on. So most platforms and technologies come with trade-offs. One solution, for your backend database may be faster for reads and query, and the other may be better performance at write or update time. What are your needs? You're not going to necessarily have a perfect solution that is optimal for both reads and for writes. And so you need to be careful in that you understand that most technologies are able to give you something, but that those somethings often come with trade-offs, and so you need to understand that your product has a limited value in what it can deliver, but be realistic when choosing and make sure that you fit for your best use case. So now let's talk about ways we can deal with the Nirvana fallacy and avoid falling into that pitfall. I like this quote here at the top. If you're going to argue that something should be abandoned because it is imperfect, then you must simultaneously propose a more effective alternative. So I like to think of this in terms of the vaccination example. Vaccines aren't 100% effective. They do have side effects. But if you're going to argue that we shouldn't vaccinate because of those two items, you should be prepared to put forth an alternative that equally benefits society's health and their collective health of the those involved as you get from vaccinating. And if you can't, then you really need to reconsider what it is you're arguing against. The second suggestion here is set a deadline. So we've touched on the fact that striving for perfection can lead to dithering. If you spend too much time on your edge cases, then you're wasting time that's not adding value. So if you set a deadline, it's likely to force you into considering what are the main chunks of functionality, the main things I'm trying to accomplish, how can I deliver those? And if you focus on those, you're focusing on the things that really are driving value. And in a similar way, this last one, consider real scenarios of real actors. So you want to make sure this scenario you're arguing and proposing for, is actually something that you're going to deal with. You don't want to chase what are called edge cases when you're defining requirements that may not actually be real use cases. You're not going to have a user using your system this way, or your customer service representative isn't going to look at this system and be able to get information that really helps them in a way that adds value to your company. So make sure that what you're looking at are real scenarios with real actors, and you're not just trying to over design your solution. So in conclusion, the Nirvana fallacy, or when X is an imperfect solution and Y is a perfect solution, not doing X because Y is a non-realistic, idealized, perfect solution, is the trap of the Nirvana fallacy. So what we can take from this is we need to be careful in our role as business people to look out for ways where these perfect solutions can cloud our judgment as to the proper actions. Some ways we talked about doing that were looking for real tangible actions, setting a timeline, and making sure that if we are rejecting an idea that we are simultaneously proposing a better real solution.